Good morning, folks. Good to have everybody with us again today. I realize this is a difficult time, and we as the church certainly don't want to be meeting like this, but that's sort of the way that things are working out right now. Hope that you've been well. Hope that there's not been any undue distress in your life, and that the difficulties of each day do not carry over into the next day, but that we carry them one with another. And we're glad to be with you this morning. Hope that you find these times challenging and comforting as well. I believe that the most recognized symbol in the world would have to be the cross. The cross is used by both Protestant and Catholic churches in their buildings. It's used by jewelry for a number of people, universally thought to be the symbol of the church. And as this Easter season sort of moves past us, and we are a week out now, our thoughts have been, hopefully, on the cross during this time, and sort of the focal point of the events that we've been to, and sort of what we've talked about the most. I think the problem is that over the years we have sanitized the cross, and while we may be familiar with it, we're not always blessed by it. And what it means is profound, but how we use it is sometimes pretty mundane. I'm going to read a passage this morning starting out from Matthew chapter 27. A very familiar passage about the crucifixion. And I'll begin reading in verse 32, Matthew's Gospel, chapter 27. As they were going out, they found a Cyrenian man named Simon. They forced this man to carry the cross. When they came to the place called Golgotha, which means skull place, they gave him wine mixed with gall to drink. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And after crucifying him, they divided his clothes by casting lots. Then they sat down and were guarding him there. And above his head they put up the charge against him in writing, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." The two criminals were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by were yelling insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "The one who would demolish the sanctuary and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." And in the same way, the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him and said, "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He has put his trust in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am God's Son.'" In the same way, even the criminals who were crucified with him kept taunting him. This is a very disturbing passage in a lot of ways. And as we read through this passage, the actual job of placing Jesus on the cross was over. The excitement of the trial, the frenzy of the crowd, the fanatical cries of "Crucify him" were now silent, and the decree had been followed. The light was beginning to fade from the sky, and the jeering crowd, all the people who were there, the passers-by and the hangers-on, were just waiting for the drama to be played out. They were waiting for the end of it to come along. And Scripture says that the soldiers were there casting lots, in other words, gambling for his garments. Some of the followers stood at a distance, fearful and unsure. There was only two really ways of looking at this. Either you were mocking and jeering, or you were sad and scared. A very diverse crowd stood around the foot of the cross that day, and over the years it's gotten even more diverse with the passage of time. When Jesus looked down from the cross, he saw the beginning of his church. He saw those who were there, who would later become his followers, and this is the same church that you and I belong to today. Jesus had planned that they would see him lifted up on the cross so that all men would be saved. But that first step of salvation had to take place at the cross, on the cross, in the turmoil of the cross. And like when he bore all of our sin upon himself. It was a horrific day. It was a horrendous day. And there were many that were there who saw and witnessed and were firsthand participants in the events of the crucifixion. But they left that day no different than when they came. They were at the cross, but they were not blessed by the cross. Some of the soldiers were there out of duty. Some were there out of the spectacle. Some were there just to make mock of him and to make fun and to enjoy it. It was an event. And some, of course, there were to be saddened and fearful and unsure what was coming next. They were there, but they were not blessed by the cross. They were first-hand participants. They were eyewitnesses, but left unblessed by the cross. I think sometimes we in the church do the same thing. We witness the cross, we see the cross, we're aware of it, but we're not blessed by it because we don't understand it. I'm going to say something that probably will not be accepted well in every situation by everyone, but I think I've really been saddened this last week when I see in the things that we're involved in now with the quarantines and the coronavirus and all of the legislation and restrictions. It saddens me to see Easter politicized. It saddens me to see it used as a tool. I've heard people say, well, of all days, Easter should be when we gather together to celebrate, and people have broken or bent the rules in order to be together as the body. We have to come together as a church. My friends, I think if we don't understand that the message of the cross is not in the gathering together, if we're not careful, we're unblessed at the cross. We see it, we come together as that, we use this as a means. But if the message of Easter does not resonate the other 51 weeks of the year, then we have missed the message of Easter. It's not about Easter Sunday. It's not about being together. It's not about all the things that make us feel good. It is the message of salvation and the message of the cross. I think we fail to proclaim that message as we go through life. In 1 Corinthians, Paul's writing to the church at Corinth, and he says in chapter 2, "When I come to you, brothers, announcing the testimony of God to you, I did not come with brilliance of speech or wisdom, for I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. When I was with you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling, my speech and my proclamation were not with persuasive words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and power, so that your faith may not be based on man's wisdom, but upon God's power." He came to present and preach Christ and Him crucified. This was a man who had eloquence, who had training, who had wisdom, who had a lot of vocabulary, who had a lot of pervasive words that he could use, but instead he determined to preach nothing but Jesus Christ and Him crucified. This came from his deep-seated belief and understanding that this was the core of the gospel. This was the essence of the gospel. If we depart from this, if we depart into an intellectual knowledge in which we attempt to explain the events of the cross in human terms and human understanding, then we don't proclaim the power of the cross, we limit it because we try to fit it into what we understand. He said, I didn't speak from wisdom and understanding, I spoke from the power of the cross. The cross is our hope. The message of Easter carries past Easter. So many times we get caught up in the pomp and circumstance and in the events and in the meeting together and the tradition and all of those things, and it's wonderful and it's great, but we must be on guard that we don't try to make it appealing or make it presentable to the world at the losing the power of the cross itself. When the church turns to attendance and gimmicks and attention and trying to politicize and to use the events of the cross as a means of making a point, we've lost the meaning, we've lost the purpose, and we play down the events of Calvary to a point where we weaken the understanding, we weaken the impact that we have tried to have as a New Testament church. I think we must really guard against being like the soldiers who were present at the cross and witnessed it, but were unaware of its power and not understanding. So many times I think it's true because we fail to trust in the events. We fail to trust in that power. We must realize that our belief, our Christianity, our relationship with the Lord is not a do-it-yourself religion. Paul pleaded with the Galatians not to shift their faith from Jesus to confidence in themselves and the Jewish law. Don't bring it into this idea that you have to go through a certain protocol or a certain thing. Over the years, we have learned that if we could achieve salvation through other things, such as piety and right living and morality and tithing and missions and theological understanding and the beauty of our buildings and the number of times that we meet together each week, then Jesus would not have needed to die on the cross that day. If that's our basis, if that's our focus, if that's what we want to really think of as important, then we diminish the power of the cross. I think it all boils down to where our confidence is placed. I have enough confidence in my relationship with the Lord to understand that it will transcend the coronavirus. It will transcend events that we may not get to do. It transcends not being able to meet together and stand together and have fellowship time and all of those things. That's all good, but it's not the power of the cross. Paul points out our confidence must be placed on nothing else but Him as Savior. The message that was so hard for the Jew to understand, that it was not our action that led to God's approval, but rather the actions of Christ on the cross that allowed us to be approved by God, that leads us to His acceptance through grace and mercy and Him standing in our place. We can't meet enough, we can't preach enough, we can't teach enough, we can't fellowship enough to make up that difference. The cross is not a part of salvation, it is the power of salvation. And as we look at Easter, as we look at these events, it troubles me that we spend so much time and energy on this day that we don't follow the rest of the time. I've said many times that the Christmas spirit that people talk about is useless unless the Christmas spirit's present in August, in September, and April. The Easter message is useless if it's not carried every day of our life. If we don't have the same intensity, if we don't have the same desire the rest of the years we have at Easter, then we have downplayed it. We've made it a symbol, but we don't carry the power with us. 6th chapter of Hebrews contains a sharp warning against crucifying the Son of God again. That is, counting His blood without power and as doing much as the soldiers did there, presenting Him and making work without having the acceptance of what happened to us. There are some in the early church, in the face of disappointment and difficulty, who wanted to turn away from this new belief that they had. They were tempted to turn their back on the cross, cast off their confidence because they thought it would ease their burden in the moment. To do this is to refuse to share Calvary with those most in need. If we stand in opposition to the world is one thing, but to do so with an attitude that we're going to somehow insulate ourselves from the world and not be a part of it, we're above it or superior to it or greater than, then we have dismissed our message to go into the world and be salt and light, to minister to every single person that we come in contact with. Our the acknowledgement of our actions and our attitudes and the things we say sometimes stands in stark contrast to the meaning that it has in our hearts of the message of the gospel. Only those who bear the cross can share the cross. I've said that many times. You can't share it unless you have borne it yourself. It has to be something that you know within yourself. We often find that the call of Christ often contradicts and stands in stark opposition to our self-will and our carnal desires and how we seek some easier form of religion. Religion's easy. Religion is following rules. Religion is going to the right place at the right time and standing and being accepted. Following Him is hard because it means being real in every situation of our life. It means facing people that you don't like and still dealing with them in a way that's faithful to the Lord. It is sharing the gospel to people that are not like you. And oftentimes we justify our attitudes and our behavior by very high-sounding explanations and very trite expressions. And we use it in a sense of piety, of we're trying to do the right thing, when actually all we're doing is trying to avoid bearing the cross, avoid following the mandate that He gives to us. We turn away, much as the soldiers did that day at Golgotha, turning the most holy of times into some tragic situation in which we have no interest other than a casual awareness. We stand close, we stand within reach of it, but we fail to grasp it. We fail to be personally involved with what's going on there before us. Many years ago, a pastor friend of mine was talking about a situation he had when he was in seminary. He went to see one of his professors one day, an older professor, been teaching there for 30 or 40 years. And he walked into his office and the professor was weeping. He was sitting there at his desk just silently, softly weeping. And he said, what is wrong? Is there a problem? Is something happening in your family? He said the old man looked up and said, I was reading again where they crucified my Lord. That's the essence of Easter. I was reading again where they crucified my Lord. It's not about the meeting together as the church. It's not about having a big attendance. Over the years, church leaders always say, Easter is one of those big times. We had the biggest attendance. It don't matter unless we understand we're reading about where they crucified my Lord, our Lord, your Lord, individually, personally. That's the essence of the cross. Luke 9:23 says, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. During this time, are we willing to take up the cross and follow Him? Sometimes that means not going along with the accepted line. It may be thinking or doing something differently. It's easy to follow the crowd. It's easy to say, yes, we should be doing this. Yes, we should be doing that. It's wrong that we're not allowed to do that. And some of the things I even agree with. But how we present ourselves, this is the most important thing. Meeting together as the church, meeting together in a building, meeting together on Sunday is not the sum total of how we are to present ourselves as the body of Christ. It's how we are every day of the week, to all the people we come in contact with, the way we present the love and mercy and grace of Christ to those in the world around us, especially with those that might disagree with us. The cross can stand as an empty symbol. People wear it all the time. That really means nothing other than a piece of jewelry. It can be hung in our off the rearview mirror of our car. It can be a bumper sticker. It can be on top of our churches. It can be on our homes. It could be on our walls. It could be anywhere. But the power of the cross is not in those things. The power of the cross is in our heart, in our soul. It is in the realization that this was my Lord that gave up His life for my sin, that I might have eternal life. That's the message that we share. That's the gospel carried forth into the world in a very powerful way. Hope the Lord gives you a wonderful week. We're grateful for every day that we have together in Him. And hopefully we will be able to meet together soon as the body to celebrate. But remember, we are the church. We carry the church. We represent the church each and every day. The Lord be with you.